Okay, so let's unpack this today. We're embarking on quite a fascinating deep dive.
We really are. Into a very ancient text, actually.
Yeah, a dialogue that, it cuts right to the heart of living a meaningful, wise life.
Mm-hmm.
Our source here is the Subhasuttaṃ. It's this remarkable record of a conversation.
Between this young, curious Brahmin student, Subha.
And a really insightful spiritual teacher.
And what's amazing, I think, is how this discussion, thousands of years old,
Yeah.
it directly hits on questions we're still grappling with, like what actually defines success? How do we get genuine knowledge? What practices really lead to, inner peace?
So our mission for you today.
Yeah, is basically to pull out the key nuggets from this dialogue, give you a shortcut maybe to his timeless wisdom.
Think of it like we're following Subha along his journey.
Exactly. His whole worldview is about to get, well, gently but profoundly reshaped.
So Subha, our young Brahmin, he starts off with some pretty strong ideas, right? Things he's inherited.
Oh, definitely. Deeply ingrained beliefs. He tells the teacher that, according to Brahmin tradition, it's the householders.
People like us living in the world, families, jobs.
Right. They are the ones who succeed on the noble path.
And the monastics, those who've, renounced worldly things.
They're seen as less successful. That's the starting point.
Which immediately raises a big question for all of us, doesn't it?
It does. Do our external circumstances, our lifestyle choices, really dictate our ability to live a good life?
And the teacher's response here is classic. He's what he calls a discriminating speaker.
Yes. He doesn't just jump in and take sides based on, are you a householder or a monastic? Social status doesn't matter.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The core insight.
Go on.
He clarifies that success on this noble path isn't about what you are, householder, monastic, whatever. It's entirely about how you practice.
Right. Michapaipati, wrong practice, means you fail. Doesn't matter who you are.
But Samapaipati, right practice, means you succeed. Again, regardless of the label, it's all about the quality of your engagement.
And he makes this so concrete, so relatable, with this brilliant analogy.
Oh yeah, the farming one.
Exactly. He talks about farming, calls it great substance, great work, great undertaking, great endeavor. Mahatan, Mahakika. You get the idea.
Big deal, they say.
Big deal. And if you farm badly, little fruit.
Obvious. Yeah.
Farm well, great fruit. Then he flips it, considers trade.
If he calls.
Little substance, little work, little undertaking, little endeavor. Apathan, apakika.
Okay, so smaller scale.
Smaller scale.
Right.
But the same logic applies. Bad practice, little fruit. Good practice, great fruit.
And then he connects it directly.
Yep. Householder life is like the farming, the big undertaking. Monastic life is like the trade, maybe smaller scale in worldly terms.
But the outcome depends purely on the practice.
Purely on the practice.
So the practical takeaway for you listening.
It means the size of your life's project, whether you're running a huge company or, I don't know, focusing on a quiet passion.
Yeah.
That scale isn't what determines the real fruit.
It's the quality of how you engage with it. Your right practice. That's what truly counts. Okay, so building on that, Subha then brings up 5 specific practices. Things his Brahmin teachers really emphasize for making merit, gaining skill.
Right. Truthfulness, austerity, celibacy, study, and giving. Saka, tapa, brahmacarya, ajena, kaga.
And on the surface, these sound pretty good, don't they? Like solid virtues.
They do. But the teacher, he doesn't just nod along. He pushes back.
How so?
He asks this really provocative question. He says, okay, has any Brahmin, or their teachers going back 7 generations,
Wow.
or even the ancient sages they all revere, Ahaka, Vamaka, all those guys.
The big names.
Right. Has any of them claimed to have personally realized the results, the vipaka, of these 5 practices, Slayabhinyasachikatva, directly known it themselves?
And Subha's answer?
A very telling no.
Oof. So nobody they rely on has actually experienced the outcome they preach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this leads the teacher to use another powerful image. He compares the whole Brahmin teaching tradition to a line of blind men, and Havikshepa or Parasatsta, where the first one can't see, the middle one can't see, the last one can't see.
So it's just being passed down without anyone actually seeing the truth of it.
Precisely. And he says that kind of teaching, based purely on tradition without direct knowing, it becomes empty. Hasaka, namaka, rataka, kachika, hollow, void.
Okay, Suhana must be getting a bit uncomfortable now. It's challenging his whole tradition.
He definitely is. He gets defensive. He quotes his own teacher, this Brahmin named Pokkharasāti.
And what did Pokkharasāti say?
Pokkharasāti apparently dismissed claims of superhuman states, a noble knowledge and vision. Manusadama ala marinancha dasanavisesa.
So higher states of knowing.
Yeah. Pokkharasāti basically said such claims are laughable, impossible for a human to know or realize. Just dismisses it out of hand.
But the teacher has a comeback for that too, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. Another brilliant analogy. He says, imagine a man born blind.
Okay.
And this blind man claims that colors black, white, blue, yellow, red don't exist. Or the sun, the moon, the stars, uneven ground. None of it exists simply because he can't see or know them.
Right. His lack of perception doesn't mean they aren't real.
Exactly. And the teacher asks Subha, is this blind man speaking rightly?
And Subha has to say.
He agrees, no, of course not.
So the conclusion is pretty stark then.
It is. Pokkharasāti, by denying the possibility of higher knowledge just because he hasn't experienced it, is just like that blind man.
Blind without eyes. And no kakako.
Making it impossible for him to know or realize such states. And it gets worse.
How?
The teacher actually analyzes Pokkharasāti's statement itself, the dismissal. And he shows it was confused, not based on their own sacred texts, amanta, not properly considered, apaisoka.
So basically flawed even by their own rules.
Fundamentally meaningless, anathasanyakita, even by Brahmin standards for good, authoritative speech.
Wow. That's a pretty thorough dismantling.
It really is. And it poses a challenge for us, for you listening. How much of what you hold to be true is just something you've inherited?
Versus what you've actually verified through your own experience, your own critical thinking.
It's a crucial question.
Okay, so if someone like Pokkharasāti, presumably learned in his tradition, can't see these higher truths, why not? What's blocking the view?
Well, the teacher identifies two major internal roadblocks. First up, he introduces the 5 hindrances, Panyaka and Nivara.
The 5 hindrances, what are they?
They are sensual desire, kamachanda, ill will, vyapada, sloth and torpor, thanibada.
Kind of mental heaviness, laziness.
Exactly. Then restlessness and remorse, udaka kukuka. And finally, skeptical doubt, vichikicha.
Okay, so these 5 things cloud the mind.
They do more than cloud it. He says Pokkharasāti is veiled, covered, enveloped, enmeshed by them. Ovuto, nivuto, ofuto, parianato.
Like being wrapped up in something thick.
Yeah, imagine trying to see clearly through a really dense fog or tangled in a net. That's what these hindrances do to our minds. They obscure clarity, obscure true insight.
Okay, that's the first roadblock. What's the second?
The second is attachment to the 5 strands of sensual pleasure, panya kama guna.
Which are?
The pleasant experiences through our senses. Pleasant forms, sounds, smells, tastes, touches. The things we typically enjoy.
Right. And the problem isn't the pleasure itself, but...
It's the attachment. The teacher says Pokkharasāti is bound, infatuated, obsessed by these. Kathito mukito ajapando.
Hooked, basically.
Totally hooked. And crucially, seeing no danger in them, lacking the wisdom to see a way beyond them and escape. And this, too, prevents him from realizing higher knowledge.
Okay, so the hindrances obscure the mind, and attachment to sense pleasures keeps it bound.
Exactly. And he uses another really good analogy here to explain different kinds of joy. He talks about fire.
Fire, okay.
He says, think about a fire lit with fuel. Dikaikopadana, using grass, sticks, logs. It burns brightly, gives off radiance.
Yeah, a normal campfire.
And he compares this to the joy we get that depends on the 5 sensual pleasures. Pidi panyaka kamagun paika. It needs external fuel.
Okay, makes sense.
But then he asks Subha, what about a fire lit without fuel? Nisalata kamagudana.
A fire without fuel? How's that possible?
Well, Subha says the same thing. He says it's impossible unless. Unless it's done by someone with psychic power, idimata. Someone with extraordinary abilities.
Ah, so it's possible, just not in the ordinary way.
Exactly. And this fire without fuel, this is the teacher's analogy for a different kind of joy. A deeper, purer joy.
One that doesn't need sense objects as fuel.
Precisely. A joy that arises apart from sensual pleasures, apart from unwholesome states of mind. And this kind of joy is what leads to deep meditative states, like the 1st and 2nd jhana.
These profound states of mental absorption and tranquility.
Yes, far beyond our everyday experience. So it helps us understand why, clinging only to ordinary sensory experiences, even the nice ones, can actually prevent us from accessing something deeper, a more profound kind of well-being, a more insightful state.
So it raises the question for you, the listener. Are you maybe settling for that fire with fuel?
Right. When perhaps a deeper, purer flame, that fire without fuel, is actually possible within your own life.
Okay, so the conversation then circles back, right? Back to those 5 Brahmin practices for making merit.
Yes. Truthfulness, austerity, celibacy, study, and giving.
And the teacher asks Subha, okay, of these 5, which one do Brahmins say yields the most fruit?
And Subha picks giving. Generosity, kagai. That's considered the top one in his tradition.
But the teacher, he doesn't just leave it there. He presents a scenario.
A thought experiment. Imagine 2 Brahmins go to a great sacrifice, a big ceremony.
Okay.
And one of them is only thinking about himself. I hope I get the best seat, the best food.
Yeah.
Self-interest. And if some other Brahmin gets that best seat or food instead, this guy gets angry, upset, displeased.
Not very generous-spirited.
Not at all. So the teacher asks Subha, okay, what result do Brahmins say comes from that kind of giving? Giving mixed with envy and resentment.
And Subha has to admit.
He admits that, well, Brahmins typically say they give out of compassion. Anukampajataka vane. The intention is supposed to be compassionate.
And just like that, the teacher subtly slips in compassion.
Anukampajataka.
As a 6th basis for making merit. It wasn't on the original list of 5.
Exactly. It's a really clever, profound reorientation, shifting the focus towards the motivation, the inner quality.
That is a remarkable shift. Okay, what happens next?
Well, then the teacher asks Subha another interesting question. He says, okay, these 5 practices, truth, austerity, etc., where do you actually see them practiced most abundantly?
In householders or in monastics?
Right. Who's actually doing them more?
And Subha makes a maybe surprising admission here.
It is quite surprising, given his starting point. He confesses he actually sees these virtues practiced more abundantly in the monastics.
And less in householders. Apokharasāti.
Yeah. And his reasoning is interesting. He says householders, they're burdened by their great substance and great work. Remember the farming analogy?
Right, the big undertakings.
So because of all that involvement, they often struggle. They aren't consistently truthful or ascetic or celibate or devoted to study or even truly generous. There are too many conflicts and pressures.
Whereas the monastics, with their little substance and little work.
The trade analogy. They have fewer worldly entanglements, so it's easier for them to consistently practice these virtues. That's Subha's observation.
So his own experience contradicts the initial belief he stated.
It does, which leads the teacher to offer this really radical reinterpretation of those 5 practices.
What does he say they really are?
He says they aren't just external acts you perform to tick boxes for merit. He describes them as preparations for the mind. Sitasaha ete parikar vadami.
Preparations for the mind. How so?
Specifically, he says they are tools or supports for developing a mind free from hostility and ill will.
So practicing truthfulness, austerity, giving, it helps cultivate a benevolent inner state.
Exactly. He says when you practice these virtues properly, you cultivate understanding, athavada, and joy, dhamavida. You get this delight, dhamopasanyada pamuja, that comes from wholesome conduct.
And that state of mind is what's truly important for inner peace.
That's the core. It shifts the whole focus. It's not about racking up points for good deeds.
It's about cultivating a specific quality of mind, a benevolent, clear, peaceful mind.
Yes. The internal transformation becomes primary rather than just the outward performance.
That's a huge shift, especially like you said, in a world that often just looks at our roles or actions on the surface.
So we're moving towards the end of the dialogue now.
Right. And Subha asks one more big question. He wants to know about the path to companionship with Brahma.
Brahma being, a high, revered, heavenly realm in the cosmology of the time, a state of great peace and purity.
And Subha says he's heard that this teacher actually knows the way.
And the teacher responds with, well, complete confidence, no hesitation.
He uses another analogy, doesn't he?
Yes, a lovely one. He says, imagine a man born and raised in a particular village. Let's call it Nakaragama.
Okay.
If you ask that man for directions back to his home village, would he hesitate? Would he be uncertain?
No, of course not. He knows it inside out.
Exactly. He knows all the roads, all the paths. The teacher says, just like that man knows his village, I know Brahma. I know the Brahma world, the path leading to it, and how one gets reborn there. Total certainty based on direct knowledge.
Okay, so what is the path? What's the core teaching here?
It's the cultivation of 4 boundless states of mind. often called the Brahma Viharas, or the divine abode.
The Brahma Viharas. Okay, let's list them.
First is loving-kindness metta.
How do you practice that?
You intentionally pervade one direction with a mind filled with loving-kindness. Then the second direction, the third, the fourth, then above, below, all around.
Yep.
You fill the entire world, everyone in it, with this boundless loving-kindness.
Vast, exalted, immeasurable.
Free from hostility, free from ill will. That's key.
Okay, number 1, loving kindness. Number 2,
Compassion, karuan. Practiced in the exact same way, pervading all directions, the entire world, with boundless compassion for suffering.
number 3.
Sympathetic joy, mudita. Taking joy in the happiness and success of others.
Yeah.
Again, pervading all directions boundlessly.
And the 4th.
Equanimity, upekkha. Maintaining balance and peace, not swayed by gain or loss, praise or blame. Pervading all directions with this immeasurable equanimity.
So these 4 states, cultivated boundlessly, are the path.
They are the path to that Brahma-like state, yes. And he uses one final analogy to show their power.
What's that?
He talks about a strong conch blower.
A musician playing a conch shell trumpet.
Right. With just a little effort, a skilled blower can make that sound heard easily in all 4 directions. It just radiates outwards.
Okay.
He says, similarly, when you cultivate these 4 boundless states, these Brahma Viharas, as mind deliverances, chitta vimuktiya.
Mind deliverances, meaning they free the mind.
Yes. When your mind is developed like that, any limited actions you might have done, any negative karma, pamakakatakamai, it doesn't stick. It doesn't remain or persist in the same way.
Because the mind is so vast and purified.
Exactly. The boundless quality essentially overwhelms or dissolves the limited negative stuff. It allows for true freedom.
So this isn't just some, abstract philosophy. It's a very concrete, actionable practice.
Absolutely. For cultivating a mind that literally transcends its usual limitations.
A path to real inner peace, and presumably a more positive way of being in the world, too.
That's the promise, not just ideas. The Brahma Viharas are presented as a practical blueprint for, well, rewiring your mind.
Imagine, consciously expanding kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, radiating it out to everyone without limit.
Effortlessly dissolving those internal barriers of hostility, envy, resentment, indifference. That's the profound shift the teacher's outlining here.
Wow. We've really covered a lot of ground today, haven't we?
We have. Quite a journey following Subha.
Yeah, starting with those initial assumptions, householders versus monastics.
Then seeing those inherited beliefs get seriously challenged.
Exploring the inner obstacles, the hindrances, the attachments that block insight.
And finally landing on this incredibly profound and practical path, cultivating these boundless states of mind.
What strikes me is the timeless relevance of it all, how the teacher just keeps reframing things.
He guides Subha, and by extension, us, you listening away from maybe superficial views.
Towards these deeper, more universally applicable truths about conduct, about wisdom, about our inner life.
And, by just reporting this content impartially, we can really appreciate the depth of these insights ourselves without needing to endorse any single viewpoint dogmatically.
Right. So thinking about what this means for you, the listener, consider this. If true success isn't actually defined by your job title or your lifestyle,
but by your inner practice.
And if the path to, let's say, ultimate well-being really lies in cultivating these boundless states, free from those hindrances,
then what assumptions might you be holding on to?
Yeah.
About how to live a good life, what really matters?
It definitely challenges our usual ways of thinking, doesn't it?
It really does. In a world that's so often focused entirely on external achievements, status, possessions.
Yeah.
Here's maybe a final question for you to mull over. How might prioritizing this kind of inner cultivation, developing a mind actively free from hostility, free from ill will, as we explored in this deep dive,
how might that truly redefine your own measure of what it means to live a life well lived?